So we are going to record this.
Really good.
I will put it up on YouTube when we're all said and
Really
done.
good.
I'll go.
Okay, and it is 7 o'clock, so I will be respectful of everyone's time, and we'll get this started. We actually have 4 people that are joining us. They're 2 husband and wives sets, and they're all in their own different rooms so that they didn't have all this echoing happening. So we have Nancy and Joe Kimmel, and they're in the Orange County, Bedford County, it's not Bedford, Lawrence County area. And then Mike and Debbie Sib, right? It's pronounced Sib.
Sib.
Dang it. I always see it and then my brain changes it. And you are all in, is it Morgan County?
We're in Morgan County.
Yeah. So these 2 are from the more central parts of the state. But I don't know. Debbie, how long have you and Mike been keeping bees?
Mike's been keeping bees for 52 years and I've only been keeping them for 32.
Right. Because that's like not 32, it's not.
I'm a newbie.
And then Joe and Nancy, you have been keeping them for how long?
I don't know, for 47 years for me.
And I'm 14.
See? So you all, I told you I haven't kept bees that long. I really haven't compared to these 2 couples. So they're a great, if you have questions, start typing them in the chat box and we'll go through them. For my panelists, this is what we've covered so far. We kind of did getting started the first night, what kinds of equipment, the different types of bees, and then we did pitfalls the second night. So usually all those things that I've screwed up, like maybe feeding wrong or not getting the sugar water made right. And that's and then we're here to the panel discussion to kind of answer some questions and see what everyone has. So does anyone have any questions yet? If you don't, you can either unmute or you can put them in the chat box. It doesn't really matter.
One of the things that I'd like to mention is, since there is so much COVID and people are inside a lot, you can often get more bang for your buck if you only have 60 minutes to watch something, rather than even doing an online webinar. There's a lot of universities that have some excellent videos on their websites. I think Ohio State and University of Florida, University of Pennsylvania, Cornell, and I haven't checked UC, University of California, Davis in a while, but I think they had some videos too. So if you just want to get some information on the spot, and it's all information, no chit chat, there's some videos available where you could learn a lot in a short amount of time if you can't go to a meeting or tune into a webinar.
And by the way, Purdue is starting their winter podcasts, their winter as well. It's Winter Cluster. So unless you have a question, can I ask a question of the panel?
Ask away. This is a free form for an hour, so we're kind of free forming it.
So Joe and Michael, what I'd like to know is, if you started beekeeping today, what is the one thing that you've learned that you would like to share with all the new beekeepers on the call today?
Go ahead, Joe.
Well, my first thought is that you can start anytime. I mean, not in the fall, but you can start anytime. You can start. You don't have to wait a whole year in preparation for it. You can if you want to, and that would certainly make some things easier for you. But if you're anxious to get started, you can start in spring anytime. You just got to find some place to order your bees, some place to order your equipment, and hopefully you get the same equipment from the same entity for all of your hives, so that they all fit real well. And try to find out where you can get some bees. And I'm sorry, I forgot the most important thing. When I started beekeeping, I bought that is it the XYZ book on beekeeping?
Yes.
It's like in its 50th edition or something. And read that thing from cover to cover and thought I knew everything. Of course, that's what every new beekeeper thinks. But in the end, I learned far more once I joined a club, far more. And I would just encourage you to join a club and get a mentor from that club, someone who's willing to come and see your hives, and someone who's willing to let you come and see their hives. You don't have to have 10 hives to know the difference between how they operate. It certainly helps, though, to have access to that many, or at least 5 or 6, just so you can see that each hive is a little bit different.
Yeah, I think I would advise a new beekeeper go with a nuke rather than packages. They're a little more expensive, but it's more sure to take hold. And I would get at least 2. 2's a good number because you can see the differences in them. And you need to have some education before you get the bees, because if you get the bees then start learning about them, you're always behind. You want to stay and do things on time, because if you get behind with like feeding in the spring and your treatments, it's detrimental to the bees. You don't get the bees building up as fast, so you don't get the full effect of what they need to build up for the summer to get everything ready for winter. And that first winter is the most critical, getting them through that first winter. And that'd be my advice.
Okay, so I'll peel off this a little bit since no one's put anything in the chat yet. Knowing that, you all started a long time ago, and as a beekeeper, new beekeeper, you might go ahead and buy all the equipment. What was one piece of equipment that you maybe bought as a new beekeeper that you're like, that was a waste of money and I shouldn't have done that?
I was pretty cheap, so I didn't buy too much.
I would say that before buying a bee brush, although you do need a bee brush if you need to quickly maybe get them off of you, a turkey feather works much better than a bee brush, or even just a wad of long grass. But a bee brush on bees is sort of aggravating to them.
And they get caught up in the bristles sometimes if you don't do it quite right.
Yeah. When we got started, we basically just bought the boxes. I'd recommend to go with a good jacket or suit, because if you get stung quite a few times through some equipment that's not up to snuff, say you buy some used suit and it's got a hole in that you don't notice, you're less likely to be comfortable. I think
Bees will
as
find
far
that.
as your protective gear, when you start off, you want to be comfortable. And I think that makes a big difference, because then you're not afraid to get into your hives.
Gina, the one thing that we did buy that I felt like it was a waste of time, and that's simply because now we realize how ineffective it was. It is a frame holder for the side of the box that you take your frames out and you put them on. Well, what ends up happening is, it sounds really cool. Okay, I'm going to put them there so I don't have to put them on the ground. And then you get your first box on, and then you put your second box on. Then you put if you use screen excluders, and then you put your 2 supers. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I left the frame holder on the very bottom. Now I'm having to see, he's laughing, he's done this. You take everything off again to take that out. So we don't use it. It just sits over there and it looks nice. And someday somebody's going to say, I want to buy one of those, and I'm going to just give them this one. So that is the one piece of equipment I think we bought that really was ineffective for what it was supposed to be used for.
I can see where it would be helpful in a top bar hive.
It could be, I'm not sure I would even need it for a tub bar hive. Our tub bar hive, that the only one we have is one that was given to us so we could test and do things like that. We don't take the frames out so much as we slide them over. Mm-hmm. So with the Landshock, you actually take the frames out, look at them, put them back, especially if you're trying to make sure you don't have a queen on one that you keep sliding over and she keeps running to the next one. But yeah, so I'm not sure I'd even use it for a top bar hive.
Nancy, you got a piece of equipment that you wish she hadn't bought?
Nothing that we spent a lot of money on, but we've also, it's much easier to pick up a frame and hold it on either end than to use those metal frame holders also. Sort of the same idea as the one Debbie's talking about. That you don't really need.
Yeah, they
You
look like
can-
smaller versions of like ice hooks or whatever to grab
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you all like those hand
There
movements,
are-
that's exactly what that is.
Right. There are some beekeepers
Mhm.
that will not allow you to use those in their apiary because they say that you could smash queens with them. So I agree, Nancy. That's another one that.
The only guy that I found that likes that consistently is David Rabe, and it's because he only has one arm. So he can actually grab it and maneuver it around with that. But other than that, people will get them and they stop using them.
The thing you mentioned about holes in your jacket or your jeans or whatever, you have to have duct tape handy because you can just duct tape the holes in your clothing if you have to.
Yes.
Now, there was one piece of equipment that I was upset we got. Nancy and our son Chase contributed towards getting a extractor. It was a lot more money than I ever imagined an extractor would cost. And I regretted that till the first time we started extracting honey. And then it was the best buy we made in our lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is easy. We extract honey for several other hobby beekeepers if they can't afford to or don't want to invest in a decent extractor. And the really cheap ones, the plastic ones that you can just put on a table, are really pretty light and sometimes frustrating. But we are happy to extract honey for any beekeepers who want to bring their frames over to our house. So you could, I'm sure you can find people in your area that would let you bring your honey frames to extract at their house. And if you check out the plastic boxes at your stores, you can find a size that the frames fit in pretty easily.
Yeah, a plastic tote to carry them
Right.
in. Yeah.
Right. They do sell those and they're very expensive in the beekeeping catalogs, but you can make do with a tote. And I've also found there's a food co-op in our small town, and there's some produce boxes that the frames will fit in exactly if you just want something that you can throw on the fire or whatever. So there
will be times when you want to save frames.
Yeah.
Both unused brood frames as well as unused honey frames.
If you have trouble carrying the boxes though with the frames, you can always invest in a cooler. So John Schellenberger,
Right.
who we all know, when we're going to extract honey, we put the frames in a cooler because it's very easy to quickly shut that lid so the bees don't find the honey.
Right. Right. There's some stuff online about creating a cooler that you can use to store bees in the winter. I mean, people have used coolers more than I ever thought.
Wow.
Yeah, I've always found it easier just to use regular bee box. And because it's something that you can actually use on the hive, just put a piece of plywood on bottom, cut it the same size as the box.
Yes.
Store your frames in there. And we have little carts that we've made up that we can actually put the crystals in the bottom, stack the boxes up, and then we don't have to worry about the wax balls.
That's great. I'd love to see a picture of those.
Parts were so much easier. We put wheels on them, Nancy, so that we could move them, because what we found is we were stacking here and they were in the way, and then we'd pick them up off this stack and put them over here. And so after about, the fifth time of restacking 10 or 15 supers, we just decided, Mike actually made these really neat carts, and now I can, even as small as I am, I can just move them around.
And
so that's innovative. If we're talking about something you've made that's innovative that you could use in your hive, that would be the one thing I think we've done.
And that's a great idea, because as you get older, the weight is much more of a factor. When I first started out, unstacking and stacking heavy hive bodies was okay. But as I've gotten older and had some back issues, etc., the weight of what I was working with was much more of a factor, which is why we have tried to only use mediums so that everything is the same size. That it hasn't always happened because people who sell nukes usually sell them in deeps, and when you get a package, it's a real easy way to install a package into a deep. But if I had it to do over again, I would go to 8-frame.
Ah,
8-frame medium, just because every year some things get a little more difficult.
mhm.
You're not talking about the bees, you're talking about your back.
I was talking about my husband.
Oh. Yeah, it definitely gets more difficult. I know that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Nancy, you were mentioning that the weight, if you have even a medium that is, you're letting the bees collect the honey in, and you're looking, it might be on the 3rd or 4th or 5th level or higher, you have to lift it up to get it off. That medium can weigh 60 pounds.
Yes.
And if you're short, it's rough.
And if
Yeah.
it were to be a deep, it could weigh 100 pounds.
And it's not safe to have stacked boxes 4 and 5 up to where you have to have a ladder. I know they make great pictures, but it's just not really safe to do that.
Right. It's
Yeah.
very
What we
unsafe.
normally try and do is the top super not to have above my shoulders.
That's a good
And
rule.
we go with shallow supers, so they are lighter. And we also are able to take it off sooner because there's less,
Right.
I guess, square inches there, so they fill it faster.
Right.
And when they we'll go up to 3 to 4 at the most. And if they fill them up, we'll pull them off and extract them and keep putting fresh ones on rather than just keep going up. Because you get above your shoulders and things
Right.
get a lot heavier.
Right.
I hadn't thought about that. That's better than what Kenny Schneider used to do. And I know he had multiple ladders out there one year trying to get all of his boxes off, and
Oh, it's really unsafe.
yeah. But that makes sense, because I was going to ask you, okay, well, do you just keep rotating out the top box? But if you just go ahead and pull it to extract it, if it's capped, that makes sense. Okay.
You had another question, Gina? I'm sorry. We keep
No, you're
interrupting.
good. I'm just gonna remind people, if you have other questions, you can unmute, put it in the chat box. We're free forming it. We're 20 minutes in and we're free forming this. So whatever questions come up, they don't have to follow anyone's train of thought. We'll flow with it.
Gina, hi,
Yes.
Susie Sams, and I feel very badly because you all are such professionals, and I'm just interested, and I'm concerned for the bees in this weather when it's so very, very cold, and then it's very, very hot. Is there any extra work that's involved in maintaining their safety and making sure they're viable in this kind of weather?
I think you're going to get different opinions on this. We have 4 or 5, I'll call them master beekeepers here. I'm including Gina, and many of the people who are listening, I'm sure, are very qualified. I don't mean the certified master beekeepers. I mean they're highly qualified. And so let's say we have 5 highly qualified beekeepers here. We're going to have at least 7 different opinions about how to answer some of these questions. But I think, my opinion to answer that question is, I think it's really hard on bees when it goes back and forth the temperatures, because they get into their cluster and then they come out of their cluster and they get back into their cluster. And that's not the easiest thing for them to do. My personal preference is to put some kind of insulation around hives and on the top of the hives, both as a windbreak, but also to slow down that change of temperature. Anyone, please disagree if you do, because I'm looking for as many answers here as possible.
Well, and so that goes with the question in the chat, because Chris asked, did everyone cover the hives for their winter?
Not everyone.
So I will tell you, we do not. First of all, we run anywhere from 150 to 200 hives. Therefore, we are not covering our hives. What we do is we use a windbreak to try and keep the wind from blowing through them. I do agree with Joe. It is better for the bees if it's cold and stays cold and then warms up and stays warm than when it goes up and down. Because when it goes up, the temperature goes up, they get confused. They actually feel like, well, it could be spring. Maybe I need to start, the queen could start laying, or when we need to eat more of our store up. And when they eat more of their store, then they don't have enough to last through the winter, and then they get a cold snap. If the queen starts laying too early, then the bees will actually cover that brood to their death. They won't be able to get back in a cluster because now they've got to cover the brood. And that's what happens when, as Joe mentioned, you've got temperatures that are going up and down. So much better for the bees if it stayed one temperature, as I said, and then went back up and stayed up.
The hardest temperatures for them is when it gets below 20 degrees. They have trouble moving the cluster to new honey. So if the temperature ideally would stay between 45 and say 25 throughout the winter would be my ideal situation, rather than jumping up to 50 and going back down below 20. But it goes back, I think the main thing is feel okay with your bees being out there in the cold is if you took care of them properly in the fall and late summer. If you've got your mites treated and plenty of food on them, and have some good tight boxes that the wind can't blow through. If the bees have a good tight box and plenty of food, they can create heat. So we want a windbreak somewhere around the hives to keep the wind from blowing directly on the box, to have boxes that aren't full of holes in the corners so the wind can blow right on through, plenty of food, and have them as healthy as we can going in the winter. And we feel like that's the best way to get them through. And if you've got sick bees coming in winter, you're going to have dead bees going out of winter.
And when Mike talks about a windbreak, if you can't provide something all around, the most important sides would be like the north and the west. And I also think it's important when you set up your hives to make sure they're level. And some people feel like it's better if they're angled slightly, so there's no chance of if somehow moisture gets in there that it ends up accumulating in one or two spots.
Yeah. When you have trouble, usually it's with the solid bottom boards that you need to tilt them to the front to make sure the moisture comes out. Screen bottoms, it'll get out through that screen.
Right. And we use screen bottom boards.
Yeah. What's more important is, can you get ventilation through the top? Because when the bees create the heat, when they start laying brood, that temperature around the brood's going to be around 90 degrees. And you have the cold air right next to them. So what you're going to get is, I can't think of the word right now.
Condensation.
Moisture.
Condensation.
You're going to have moisture and condensation. So you want that warm air to be able to ventilate out through the top. You don't want it to have so much ventilation, all the heat goes out, but you want that moisture belt get out, or something on top of the hive to absorb the moisture. Like your dried sugar candy boards or some kind of wood chips or something to absorb it. There's multiple types of material that you can use.
Yeah, and so for like my hives, because mine are different than everybody else's, because mine are on more public land, my windbreak is actually a vinyl fence. And so that helps break the wind. To cover it though, this year, the one hive that we had going in, we put like the thick landscape fabric just over the top, because it's our top bar hive that a beekeeper that had passed away a couple years ago built. And so we just kind of lay that over the top because the top is peaked. So we lay it between the top of the frames and the peak just to kind of keep the air from all floating to the top. Then the year before on my other hives, I wrapped them in a heavy shower cloth just to kind of keep the wind from coming through.
Yeah. What you have to watch when you wrap a hive is that you don't close off the ventilation. You have to make sure they can still get some airflow through it.
And make sure that you do it in such a way that you can get the wrapping off. Kenny
Correct.
Schneider used to do this, and he would freaking tie it on some funky knot, and I could never undo it. I got smart. I bought bungee cords.
Bungee cords.
So use
Yeah.
bungee cords. So do it in such a way that you can get it off if you need to get it off quickly and can put it back together easily.
Yeah, and be careful if you're using a black color when you wrap. If you use dark
Yeah.
colors, even though it's 30, 45 degrees outside, black will attract that heat and actually it can bake your bees.
Okay, let's see. Did anybody else? Okay, we covered the, do you cover the hives for the winter and what do you use? Let's go. Since we're in the winter mode, I told them all that I kind of put a candy board or a sugar board and how I did it. And there was lots of questions. So do you want to talk about how you feed your bees or keep your bees full during the winter?
Well, first of all, don't take off all your honey.
Yeah.
Remember, the bees have a couple main goals bees have, and one of those is to make it through the winter, and that's why they save so much honey stores. So don't take all of it off just for your own benefit. They need to have some, and generally, I don't know what everybody here can have a different opinion about it, but I always believe that a deep would need, well, again, we do two mediums would need at least one other medium of solid honey. And then on top of that, we always use candy boards, which is very easy to make now. We used to make the hard candy boards. We don't do that anymore. It's just mix sugar with water and some honey be healthy and pack it down, and it dries out in a day or two, and put it on the hive. I noticed one of our went and looked at that recently, and even in the winter, you need to go in there and make sure that they have not eaten all of their candy board up. If not, you need to replace it with some more. I lost my thought. Please take over, Nancy.
I am an absolute total believer in candy boards for several reasons. It's their extra food that they need if they somehow run out, and for that reason alone, you need to do it. But also, as Mike had mentioned, it helps absorb some of the moisture, and so I firmly believe in candy boards, and they can eat the candy board regardless of the temperature. You don't want to ever have liquid feed on when it gets cold. It's not good for the bees. Not only can it drip on them, but if it gets hard, they need to find more moisture to be able to ingest it, etc. So I think candy boards, and they're so easy to make now that there's more recipes out there that are quick. I just feel like everyone should have a candy board on their hives.
So yeah, Joe, that's Nancy, that's what we do. We actually will take a queen excluder. We will take the paper that comes in between the foundation. We'll lay it down. If you don't have that, you can use newspaper. We will take a 5-pound bag of sugar. We'll take a cup of water and mix it to where it's not even, it's just a thick, almost not quite solid, but thick. We'll kind of make it mounded up. So we have a spacer around it. It mounds up and we put in Honey Bee Healthy. The bees actually can eat from the bottom. It attracts, it will absorb some of the moisture, but the bees can actually go inside and eat. So it ends up like an igloo when you're finished at the end of the winter time. It doesn't drip when you get finished, and you can check it very easily. At the end of the winter, if they haven't eaten it all, we can take it off, we put it in a bucket, and we use it the next winter as well. So that's pretty much how we feed our bees as well. They're called all kinds of things, sugar boards, candy boards. Basically, it's to make sure you have feed up there. Where we are, we want about 80 pounds on all our hives going into winter. Part of that's going to be the honey that they have in the supers or in their deeps. And then part of it always is going to have some kind of feed on the top.
And you could easily make it in loaf pans or even the mini loaf pans if you need to add a little bit more later. You don't put on another whole new candy board. You just add to it with a brick kind of a thing that you've made, and you can just keep them in those little foil pans and just pop them out of those real quick and stick them in the top of the hive so you don't have the hive open long at all.
Good point. Yeah.
And Mike, I
And-
also
No.
put, talking about the importance of ventilation, I put a 1/2 inch hole in my candy board in the front that's faced to the front of the hive. So the ventilation can come in the bottom and go along the side of the hive, not through it, but just along the side out that top hole. And I haven't had trouble with, I lost several hives one winter because of too much moisture. It was just,
Yeah.
it looked horrible.
Yeah, one other thing that you need to check, Joe mentioned it a little bit earlier, is you need to check, make sure they had ate all the candy board up. But if you just peck up on the back of the hive, you can
Mhm.
feel how heavy it is. You don't have to know how much it weighs, but you can feel if it's light or not. And then if you get a 45, 50-degree day during the winter, usually, about the 3rd week of January, we'll go and pop the tops on the hives on a warm day. Usually you'll get one that's up in the 40s. And just to see if they're up there eating on it, make sure they have some left. And what we'll also do is, that's when we'll stick a 1/4 of a pollen patty in.
Mhm.
So they've got some protein in there next to that candy board. And if they're low on sugar, we'll put some more sugar on top of them.
A word of caution, no matter what people tell you, if you're popping the top on that hive, put on a veil. It doesn't
Yes.
matter if
Always.
it's 40 degrees,
Absolutely.
put on a veil.
Always.
Because when you
always.
don't, they're gonna pop you right in the
Yeah.
head.
Okay, we've had a
Right.
couple questions come up in the chat real quick. So Sheila asked, as a general rule, is it better to replace a swarm queen as soon as possible after capture, or wait to see if she is going to be a good productive queen? And if so, what is the timing on that?
What I'd do, I would let the swarm start, I'd wait a few weeks before
Get
I
them settled
replace
in.
her. I won't replace her right away, but I would replace her that same summer.
Mhm.
I'd give them a chance to get built up and start laying brood, and it'll make it much easier to replace that queen.
One thing you need to be careful about with the swarm is you don't know where the queen came from. You don't know how old she is or how young she is or whether she got mated well or whether she didn't. So the reason why we suggest replacing a swarm's queen is because of those unknowns. She may come out and look like she's going to lay really, really well. The problem is she laying enough to sustain your hive through winter? And that's one thing you don't know. You don't know if she was damaged in flying or any of those kind of things. So you want a little bit more sure bet as far as the queen.
Yeah. And as far as replacing, I would, if you got 3 swarms that summer, I would keep a couple of them, just pull a couple frames out, put them in a nuke box, and keep that queen, because you don't know if in one of your other hives, if you're going to need to replace your queen and how easy it'll be to get a new one late in the summer. I recommend people if you've got 5 hives, have at least 1 or 2 nukes sitting off the side that you can use to replace the queen.
So we have a different question. We're going to go back to feeding for a second. Is it all right to leave a side feeder with sugar water in the hive through winter, or should that be pulled?
What's a side feeder are you talking about that goes in between the frames?
Yes.
Be one of the black frame feeders.
Right. I would never leave the liquid feed in the hive, but
Okay.
my
What we do is we leave that feeder in all year long. It's there
empty.
all the time. And that's basically, we've got enough hives that we'd have to carry a bunch of feeders around and pull frames out to put them all in.
But what we don't
Oh.
leave is sugar water in them,
In the-
because sugar
Right.
water is going to lower the temperature of the bees. What Mike is saying is we leave the feeder in, we don't leave the sugar water in the feeder. We have, again,
Yeah,
we keep
when you're-
buckets and we,
When you're feeding in the fall, you want to be using that feeder, but then come late November, you want to stop and let them use that all up.
yeah, get the water, get the
You
liquid out.
want them to empty it out. But we keep it in, and you've still got 18 frames in the hive if you're using 10 frame hives. So you have plenty of space for them to store honey. It's just the matter of switching that feeder in and out throughout the year. And then you also, if you have it in the hive for the summer, you need 2 frames built out to replace it with in the winter, because you don't want just straight foundation in the hive. You want built out frames because those little cells do hold heat. It's insulation. Just a plain sheet of foundation doesn't do anything for your insulation value.
Now, if you get desperate, the blue foam insulation, we have cut it and just stuck it right in an empty unwired frame. Just we were in a situation where we needed to fill that space, and we did that. We actually then put one on either side in that particular box just to occupy the space, and it had the blue insulation and just during the winter.
Fill in the space, yeah.
Right, just to fill the space till spring.
Yeah,
Because at that time that was all we had.
yeah, just so that we're not switching a bunch of equipment throughout the year. We just leave the feeders in.
Right, I can see that, especially if you got that many hives.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've still got plenty of space. You've got 18 frames that they can work with.
Right.
Other questions? Anybody want to unmute and ask a question? That's all the questions we have in the chat box right now.
I've got to throw 2 bits in and say, we're on this panel, which makes us look like we're all kinds of professionals, but trust me, you all will learn what works. And you can have a different opinion about how you do something than what we do. And if it works, good for you.
Yeah. And if you try something new, don't make a drastic change. Don't change your entire way you keep bees. Just make small changes each year. Because if you change the way you keep bees, say you switch to foundationless frames and you change the way you feed and your bees die, you really don't know what you did different. If you just make small, subtle changes, you can help learn more than if you change a bunch of things all at once.
And if something really works well, or if you have a catastrophe, share that with some other mentor or some other beekeeper. Maybe you've had bees long enough that you don't have an official mentor, but share it with another beekeeper, get their opinion.
Right.
And remember to include our new state apiary inspectors and let them come out and look in your hives and see if they can't help you as well. Each of you now will have a new inspector for your region instead of having one across the entire state.
Have those people been hired yet, Debbie?
They're actually the people that we currently have at the state level. They're already employees. What we are now doing is training them to be beekeepers. Some of them already are. Some of them have been beekeepers. We have rejected one because she's allergic to bees and will not get in the hives. It's rather hard to be an inspector if you can't get in the beehives.
Okay, yes. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. But what you might do too is volunteer to help someone. Say you'll help them clean up around their hives or something. Every chance you can get into a beehive, you learn something every time.
Right. Go to lots of field days if you get the opportunity. Local clubs, definitely push going into local clubs. And if they have field days, make sure you get to those.
So Chris, do you have a question? I know you're unmuted. Do you have a question?
Yes.
What's that?
Oh, I was just going to ask about the pollen patties. Do you put them on in the winter? This is our first year. We're just our first winter going into it. And when did he add pollen patties? Do you add pollen patties?
We do use pollen patties in all our hives. They come in this big long, about like this, and we will cut them into an eighth or a quarter. If you put the whole pollen patty on there, what you're doing is raising hive beetles. That they love those. And so before you know it, you've got hive beetle larvae and you're just making a lot of hive beetles. So just put a small strip in. When they eat it up, then put another small strip in, but don't go for the big chunk at a time. We usually do that in the spring. We'll keep them on in the summertime, but just watch how many you put down.
Okay.
Yeah, we definitely do it. The bees will They really like the maple pollen. So when those maple buds start popping, you'll see pollen start coming in. But we typically like to keep that pollen patty on up to at least May 1st. That way, if there's a rainy day, they still have some pollen in the hive they can work with.
All right.
And we have a lot of rainy days in March and April.
Oh, yeah.
And some snow sometimes.
Yeah.
If we did.
Others, right.
Okay. Other questions anybody has? We have about 20 minutes left.
There's another thing I think it's real important for beginning beekeepers to know, and that is get yourself one of those charts, even if you just print it off the internet. It tells you the amount of time after the queen lays the egg, how long is it an egg, and then a larvae and a pupa, and when is it capped, and know the amount of time there, because there's a lot of things that happen in the hive when you're checking. And if you know that information cold, it can sometimes make it a lot easier to figure out what's going on, whether it's good or bad. And I think keeping a paper calendar handy, we have just a little paper calendar where all our beekeeping stuff is, because a lot of times, even if you got one on your watch, you need to circle dates when you've done stuff, or need to figure out when something should be happening so you can start looking for it.
Okay.
Nancy, to follow up on that, Nancy does many things better than I do, but one of the things she definitely does better is she keeps better records. She has a notebook with just an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper for each hive. And so we keep that with us whenever we get into the hives, or I should say she keeps it with her whenever she gets into the hives, and just writes down what we see, what we observe, some good things, mostly good things, sometimes bad things.
And what we did. And
you might say that doesn't make a big difference. It does. And trust me, you will never remember from one week to the next what you did in each hive. You just will not.
No.
Something else to remember, it's off the subject of keeping records, but with your hive swarming, when you catch a swarm, last year we had a lot of people say that they abscond. They put them in the box and they come back later and they've all left. A good way to stop that is put your queen excluder underneath your bottom box, between your bottom board and the bottom box. Yep. That way the queen can't get out to leave. And if the queen doesn't leave, then the rest of the bees won't leave.
She starts laying eggs, she's going to stay. They're going to stay.
Right. Yeah, you want to leave that on. Once you start seeing brood in the hive, then you can take it off. The other thing is, someone's hive will swarm and they don't see a queen. They don't see any larva, and they say they need a queen. Well, you have to give the new queen time, because when they swarm, that new queen generally hasn't emerged out yet. So from when she emerges out, you need no less than 4 weeks. I'd say 4 to 5 weeks before you're starting to see brood. So say you checked your hive and they hadn't swarmed yet, you come back and they swarmed, you shouldn't immediately go get a queen because you're not seeing that brood, because by the time the new queen starts laying, all the brood from the old queen is going to be emerged out. So we get that a lot. People say they need a queen, they come get a queen from us, they go to put in and they're finding brood. Or they will stick that new queen in and they have a unmated queen in their hive. And if they have even a virgin queen in the hive, they won't accept the new queen that you add. So you're basically wasting a queen. You need to make sure you give them at least 4 to 5 weeks after they swarm and that new queen emerges before you try and add a new queen, before you need to start looking for one.
That's my experience
too,
too,
she
Mike.
has plenty of time to lay.
When a queen hatches, it's been for me 1 to 2 weeks before she's going to take her mating flight. And then a lot of people think it could be up to 2 weeks before she starts laying eggs. And I'm with you. I think it's up to 4 weeks before she starts laying eggs.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And a lot of people get in that trouble. They'll put a new queen in and they kill it. You know, the bees won't accept her. So you wasted your $45. So just give them plenty of time. You could be checking who has one, but I want get the queen and put in. But that's also where if you have a hive that doesn't accept the queen, that's where later on they might become queenless if their queen doesn't get mated. But when you get a swarm and replace the queen that's in the swarm, if you put it in nuke box with a couple frames of bees, you've always got a queen there that's available. So,
Hi, I'm a newcomer,
good,
a
and
newbie.
you start
I have a question. Is that okay?
always kill her.
Yes, you can ask your question.
Nukes are in
I am a newbie, started this year, and I think I've done most of the things I heard about. I have a candy board, and I insulated the hive, and I also put in some pollen or pollen substitute. And I also want to try something because I'm my background, and I got a remote temperature sensor, and I stuck it inside the hive, and an equivalent one outside, and I was following the temperature. I live in Indiana, and the temperature recently has been pretty low. Anyhow, my question are two. One of the things is I had to leave for a couple of weeks on a travel, and I came back. The hives before I left were always, even though the temperature outside was around, let's say, 30 or 40, the hive temperature inside, at least according to the measurement that I had, was around 50, 55, no lower than 50. And the temperature outside could be even lower, like about 38, and the hive was always around 50 inside. Now, when I came back from my trip, I found two things. One is the hive temperature now has gone down to around 40. And there are a few dead bees I saw outside, both at the entrance and at the top place where I have for ventilation. The hive also has wood shavings to absorb the moisture. Anyhow, the question is, the bottom board, I have a slide out bottom board, and that seems to have something like a syrup. Where did that come from? I have no idea. And the implied question I have is, I don't want to open it, but I want to know whether there's any chance of my bees surviving still. Mainly because I'm concerned the temperature went down from about 50 it used to be, now it's 40. Any comments?
Okay. With your temperature, it depends if the bees are clustering close to your temperature. If right now, the bees may not be laying, they'll keep the hive a little bit cooler. But once they start laying, usually late January, early February, you'll see your temperature go up.
Well, I'm hoping they'll still be alive, but the temperature
Right.
as close as I can make it is I have two boxes, two large boxes, and the sensor is right next to where the candy board is, which is as close to the cluster I can get.
Okay.
When you do you have a screen bottom board, and when you say the stuff's on the bottom, is that on the corrugated plastic that you slid in?
Yes.
Over the screen candy board. So you pulled that out to look at it. Is that what you did?
Correct. See, I have a wired bottom, and below the wire bottom is the sliding board that I can pull out.
Did you so can dead bees go through whatever screen you put on the bottom?
No, I did find some dead bees right at the entrance, which is above that screen board.
Do you have an entrance reducer on your hive?
Say again?
do you have an entrance reducer on your hive?
Yes, the entrance is about maybe 2 inches.
Is the cutout closest to the bottom so that if the dead bees accumulated there, they couldn't get other dead bees, they couldn't get in and out of the hive?
Well, I do find the dead bees. I found today when I checked it, about 5 bees just dead right at the entrance.
That's not such a big deal, but I
Yeah.
would be, I would just be interested in knowing if you took the entrance reducer off, that if there's
Okay.
dead bees covering up the bottom.
Where they
Oh.
can't get out to do their cleansing flight, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Well,
they can't
I-
drag dead bees out of the hive because the opening they
Really?
have is all clustered up. If
Really.
he pulls
I-
out,
I-
Yeah.
if
Oh,
you
I
have a
see what you're
screen
saying.
bottom board,
I
have
haven't
this-
looked at it. I can go I also have a little, what I made was a 1/4 inch wire screen just to prevent other like mice from getting in. But I can go look at it, shine a light through it, and see whether I can get bees right up against the screen. But whatever got out, there are about, as I said, 4 or 5 bees that I just knocked off today. Just get them out of the way.
Well,
Yeah,
there'll be bees that die that they take out of the hive during the winter.
I saw Dean doing the move because he was trying to figure out which way we were
Right.
talking about. And so the opening needs to face up. It needs to be a U instead of it like a small N. It needs to be a U going up. So that way the bees will go out.
Which opening are you talking about? The entrance?
Yes.
The entrance is horizontal. Like you had like every other bee, I thought.
Right, but usually the cutout in an entrance reducer it only is cut halfway through that entrance reducer. So it's either opened closest to the bottom, or if you turn it upside down, it's
I see. No, you just flip the right tray up. The bottom board is smooth, except only thing that's in the way is the wire screen.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
You
yeah,
are.
I understand
Yeah.
what you're saying. The board that you pulled out, there is still a screen bottom board underneath that. Yes.
No, the screen is above the board that I can pull out.
the screen's above his board.
Right.
It's not like ours.
Yeah, I'm beginning to see that. So pulling that out, if you had a lot of dead bees on the bottom, what you would be able to see is when you pull that out, you'd see the dead bees
Right.
there.
Unless they fall, I don't think they can fall through that screen board. But as you said, the screen board, the board underneath the screen did not have any dead bees. But I used to see previously what I thought was a lot of wax that they popped off from the various cells. That I'm talking about early fall. But now I also see some syrupy looking liquid in it.
All of your debris is going to end up down there on that bottom, whether it's a sticky board or whether it's a screen. All that debris is going to end up down there. So it can be pollen they popped out. It can be the cappings.
Right, that's what I thought I used to see before, but there was no liquid there before. Now,
Do
only
you have-
concern
Do you
I
have
have.
any syrup on? Do you have
But
any
you
syrup
had-
on?
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you have syrup on your hive?
Do you have
Like,
any syrup on your hive?
No syrup, but I
Candy
have
board.
a candy
You have-
board.
Yes, so
Okay.
your candy board could have heated up, even though it doesn't feel like it because it's really cold.
True.
But that candy board it may not have been cooked enough to where it was solid. And when the heat went up, it started dripping, and that's what you're seeing down there. That's why we caution people, if you're going to do the cook method, make sure it's cooked so that it's very solid and it will stay that way. Or periodically it will melt and it will get on the bees, and that will actually cause them to freeze. And it sounds
okay.
like what you've got dripping on the bottom is part of a candy board that heated up.
Yeah, I think I figured that the only source that could get the syrup. But before I left for my trip, I looked one warm day. Picked it up, and the candy board was pretty much full when I put it in early December. But mid-December, I saw them eating their way through the middle of the candy board, and they can also started eating on the pollen uh, piece that I put in. And I thought they were doing fine because there was nothing at that time. But I don't know what changed. The humidity also I am measuring, and the humidity inside the hive did not ever reach more than 50%.
The temperature outside in December and mid-December hit in the
Was-
50s. We were actually
Yeah.
wearing short sleeves. So at
Right.
that point, the temperature outside is heating up your candy board. That's and Dean, I saw you shaking your head, but that's the only thing I can think of that would be dripping is if his candy board wasn't solid enough or it got high enough temperature inside of there is now dripping inside the bottom of there.
Yeah, I hate to
on your
open it
board.
now to see whether the candy board is still there.
Well, if it's
because
really
temperature
cold,
now.
I wouldn't open it, but you could put your ear next to the box, just kind
Uh-huh.
of give it a gentle tap, and you'll hear buzzing if they are in there.
Huh. Okay.
You
I'll try
said
that.
that you had a lot of wax particles on the bottom
Right.
early in the fall.
Priorly, yeah.
Okay. What size cluster were your bees then?
I have no clue about the size of the cluster, but my bees were just my first year. And when I got them, we were a few thousand, but the whole hive must have gone up to about 30,000 or so because every frame of my 18, 20 frame hive had bees in it. And every time I
Okay.
opened them up, they were full.
Okay. What I've seen before in the past is if you had a weak hive in the fall and you get wax moths in it, you'll see a lot of debris on the bottom board. And they will have cut trails through your honey and your frames, and you'll see it start dripping out.
Oh, well, I have treated them for mites, and I also treat them for what do you call it? Those little beetles. I did see some beetles around November, end of November, and so on. So I had several of them I killed, wiped them away from the frame, and the bees also seem to do a good job of getting rid of them. So several of them I had swept out the dead ones. But other than that, I think as much as learning, I have done all I could do to get the mites and the beetles under control.
Do you have one of those infrared thermometers that sort of looks like a gun?
No. This is something you can buy on the internet that looks like about the size of a quarter, and you put them inside, and it's a Bluetooth device that transmits the temperature it measured and the humidity it measured. So you can, standing outside the hive with my cell phone, I can download all the data. So that's what.
Like bird binder.
Okay. Well, and the reason I was asking about the gun thing is I've known people that have taken one of those infrared guns that measures temperature, and they will shine it in different parts on their beehive, and they can actually see where the cluster is, because the temperature will be a lot higher in that one spot where the cluster is. That would just be a way to, for fun, see if there was a living cluster of bees in the hive. That's the only reason I asked that.
Well, I have one of those infrared things that the doctors, or rather the hospital, use now. Every time you go near them, they shine it on your head and find out how hot you are.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what the range is on those things.
Those are pretty good. Yeah, they're about 10, 15 feet away. You can measure temperature.
Yeah.
I used to use them for my plane.
Well, thank you all for the questions. We are at 7:59, and I know Debbie and I talked, and we need to talk about one other thing, and that is Debbie, you want to tell them, because I'm not going to get the name right.
The Beekeepers of Indiana has a Indiana Bee School coming up on February 26th. It is in Muncie, Indiana at the Horizon Convention Center. We have a beginner track, so it's the agenda starts the very beginning for beginners. It's an all day where you have sessions that build on each other. And then we have another track that is for beginner, advanced, and intermediate, where we have breakout sessions. We have 3 guest speakers. Your entrance actually includes your lunch. So if any of you are interested in getting some more education, going to some classes, you can go out there to our website and register for that as well.
And I'll put the link when I send this video out tomorrow. I'll put the link for Beekeepers of Indiana in that email. It is a good way to learn and stuff. I was there a few times, and then every time Kenny wanted to leave here at 6 a.m., I said, no, thanks. I don't have to go this year. You know, it's just a little early when we're leaving at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning to drive up. So, but it is a good time. It's a great way to meet people. And on that website, you can also find the different clubs. So that's a good thing. Any final, I've got 8:01. So are there any final questions that we can answer for anybody? Or things
You could come up to the bee school the night before, and then you wouldn't have to get up so early.
I could, or I could have stayed at my parents', but Kenny wanted me to ride with him.
That was when it was at North Central High or at Decatur. Now it's even further.
Yeah.
So we would highly recommend, if you're from the southern part, that you would come up the night before.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have researchers there. We have lots of experience. We have commercial beekeepers. Dave Schenefield will be there, as well as all of us. And so it would be great knowledge. And just some people come year after year, not because they feel like they glean anything new after 20 years, but it's because they want to keep seeing their friends and mentoring. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you, I assume you still have the vendors coming so people can get,
Yes.
so you can do your orders, and then several of the vendors bring their stuff and you can pick it up instead of pay for shipping.
Yes. Yes.
So any final thoughts? I'd see here. I don't see any questions in the comments. So you are welcome to log off. We'll stay on here for a couple more minutes. If anybody has any final questions or wants to double check something, we can stay on for a couple minutes, and then you're welcome to log off.
Well, Gina, thanks for having us on. I think we really appreciated that. And we appreciate all the people that are on here.
Yes, and I appreciate you joining and helping, because I don't consider myself one of the experts. I'm usually happy when the bees survive. So
You're an expert too, Gina. You are.
I don't know
All
about
right.
that.
Thanks, Gina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thanks.
Thank
Gina.
you.